Hello there, welcome. So whether you are trying to get better at a sport, hobby or professional skill, there are certain obstacles that you will inevitably meet along the way, and I believe both knowing these obstacles and having some strategies that you can employ to overcome them makes the whole process more smooth and more efficient. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the multi-step process that you can use in order to get better at anything, including physical activities such as sports, or more intellectual activities such as a professional skill. Just a side note, I did make a video a few weeks ago about how to become more productive and successful, so feel free to check that out if you're interested in these kind of topics. So starting with number one, if you want to get better at anything, it's imperative that you assign importance to that goal. Throughout my videos, I often use the term having a strong reason why or having a deep reason why, and this is fundamental to improving at any kind of activity. The main reason for this is the stronger your underlying motivation, the more likely you are to persist in the face of adversity or when things get challenging. Over the years, I've participated in and experimented with various different activities, and the only ones that have stuck around are the ones that I've truly cared about. One of the main ideas behind getting better at anything or any kind of self-development or growth is that you have to be able to embrace the struggle along the way. There are endless examples of this in the real world, such as when you go to the gym, you need to be able to struggle to break down those muscles, to build them up and make them stronger in the long term. The same is true with any kind of creative activity. You have to be willing to start off being not very good at that particular thing, but over time, with that kind of grit, determination, and attention to detail, you will eventually build up the skills or the muscle memory to be able to get better at that particular activity. We live in an interesting time because now we have more resources and information and help on the internet than we ever did in human history, so in theory, everyone should be more productive. But there's a bit of a caveat. Because there are so many different things vying for our attention, it becomes a little bit overwhelming, and our default state is to seek out comfort. The problem is, comfort and growth don't go hand in hand, so you have to be able to be willing to embrace discomfort in order to be able to get better at something. Even this whole idea of struggle is necessary for success has sort of been lost or diluted in the modern mainstream media. Even looking at a specific example from a few decades ago, such as the Rocky movies, it becomes clear that a core part of this franchise is the training sequences. While these scenes are inherently motivational, one of the core ideas that underpins them is the idea that you have to be willing to embrace that discomfort and struggle in order to be able to better yourself and be ready for the challenges that await ahead. However, in more recent times, such as the latest Star Wars trilogy, the character of Rey doesn't have to go through this challenge with adversity in order to be able to rise to the level needed to overcome her enemies. Instead, she already has what it takes, so there's no need to struggle along the way. You may have heard of the concept, the 10,000 hour rule, and this basically states that in order to be able to become an expert or a master at anything, you have to have put in 10,000 hours of practice or real time into it. This is basically because it takes a lot of time and conscious effort to build up those neurological connections in your brain strongly enough to be able to consider yourself an expert or master, but more importantly, to make those skills instinctive. So this really comes down to the idea of deliberate practice. You have to be able to be intentional about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Otherwise, these things don't typically happen passively. If your goal is to be able to get fit and lift a certain weight in the gym, you have to put in those repetitions. And if your goal is to become an expert at something such as chess, you have to be able to put in the amount of time necessary so that your brain instinctively recognizes certain patterns and you know what to do without having to consciously think about every single move without knowing what the consequences of that move could be. So while the 10,000 hour rule is a very good rule of thumb, there's one specific detail that it tends to gloss over, and that is the time spent thinking or visualizing that particular activity between sessions also contributes towards those 10,000 hours. This is best seen in the Netflix TV series The Queen's Gambit, where Beth, lying in her bed at night staring at the ceiling, is already visualizing certain moves and certain patterns in chess. So when it comes to her next games, she's in effect practiced and primed herself for those particular moves and patterns. So this particular idea doesn't just hold true for chess, but it also applies to a large variety of other activities such as learning a musical instrument or taking part in a particular martial art such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If your goal was to learn the piano and the only time you spent thinking about or practicing the piano was in those specific sessions that you've timetabled, then it's also going to really slow down your progress, because the kind of person who thinks about the music, the instrument and their particular progress in between sessions is going to have a big advantage. So moving on to point number 3, and that is to optimize for failure. As I mentioned earlier, struggle is an inevitable part of any kind of growth, but a more specific variant of struggle is failure. No chess master gets to where they are without failing or losing to a huge number of opponents along the way throughout their journey. The same is true for the best athletes. There doesn't exist a single one that has got to the top of their game without having to overcome various setbacks and various failures along the way. So in a way, what's important is that you're able to manage your ego. Nobody inherently enjoys losing, but coming to terms with the idea that it's a core part of the process can help alleviate that negativity that comes from having a bad experience. Even in my own case, when it comes to making the videos for this particular YouTube channel, there's a clear trajectory in that when I started off, I made loads of mistakes, the videos didn't come out particularly great, my presentation wasn't the best, and many other examples too. When I was looking at some of my favourite YouTube channels, it became obvious that some of the people who I admire the most and make some of my favourite content started off in a similar vein. Now that's not to say that my trajectory will follow theirs, but at the same time, it's still clear to see that a core part of this is being able to put yourself out there and be okay with the idea that you will make mistakes and not look as good as you will in the future. Most people who are interested in content creation never actually start because they don't know how to come to terms with the fact that where they are now and where they want to get to is so vastly different. So this takes me to point number 4, and that is learn from those who are better than you. Remember that your ego wants constant and instant gratification, but that's counterproductive towards getting better at anything that you care about. Personally, I find that most people compare themselves to their peers or people at the same level as them, rather than people who are much better than them at that particular skill. While this is a pretty natural thing, the only problem is that if you try to emulate people at your particular level, then you end up slowing down your progress compared to when you try to emulate people who are much better than you. This is why it's important to have good role models and people to look up to, because without these, you won't have anything to aspire towards, and then you won't end up getting better as much as you could otherwise. I'm pretty confident that if you ask any distinguished person within a creative industry or any sports person, did they have any particular idols or people who inspired them when they were younger, the answer is always going to be yes. I think part of the reason for this is it takes someone to be able to show you the way and what the human body and mind is capable of. This is best seen in athletics, where once a particular record is eventually broken, then usually many other people also surpass that particular time. Until that record is initially broken, it's not clear whether it's even possible in the first place, and also once other people break it, it adds motivation to your own journey. And last but not least, the final point is to create the best environment possible that is conducive of the kind of success you're aiming for. For example, if you're aiming to become very productive at work, then it's also very important that you create a workspace or an environment that motivates you and allows you to get things done as best as possible with minimal distractions. Whatever task you're aiming for, if you're able to cut out the clutter, then it reduces your chances of being pushed in the wrong direction or away from your underlying goal. In a way, what it really comes down to is reducing or removing friction. So for example, if your goal is to become better at something such as football, but currently you have to assemble and disassemble the goals, the nets, and your actual playing area every time that you want to practice, then this friction will reduce the chances of you actually doing it and will in turn slow down your progress. Having a dedicated area where you do your specific thing really helps because of a concept called neuroassociation. So if you have a different room or a different area for each specific purpose or activity, then it makes it much more likely that you will succeed in that particular area. And the last part of this is it's not just the physical environment that matters, but also your own routines and your own mental or emotional environment too. For example, getting enough sleep is essential for recovering from those physical activities, but also in order to be able to strengthen those neurological pathways in your brain, it helps to get enough sleep so that you're able to get better at that particular activity over time. So to summarize this point, if you're able to create dedicated areas, reduce or remove clutter, and create healthy habits and routines, then your progress will definitely increase over time. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any thoughts or comments, then feel free to leave them down below. Subscribe if you're interested. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.